Welcome to the May 2025 Shepard-Smith Compliance Consulting Deep Dive Podcast.
Hello, everyone.
All right, you beautiful bunch of compliance aficionados, buckle up. We are about to commando roll through the regulatory undergrowth today.
The colorful analogy.
Think of us as your friendly, maybe slightly over-caffeinated Sherpas, right? Guiding you through the mountain range of rules so you don't accidentally, yodel into a fiscal abyss.
We are SSCC, your partners in navigating compliance complexities.
Your go-to gurus.
Yeah.
Making sure your ducks aren't just in a row, but they're wearing tiny compliance hats and filling out all the right forms.
An important goal, certainly.
Absolutely. Now, before we unleash this torrent of crucial compliance knowledge, a couple of quick pit stops.
Yes, some important housekeeping notes.
First, and this is important, folks, check out our May newsletter. Seriously, it's not just, thrilling bedtime reading.
Although we do try to make it engaging.
We do. But it also has the vital intel on our upcoming office closure dates for May.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want you having a compliance emergency and finding our bat signal is temporarily off because we're, trying to catch a sunbeam.
Indeed. Please check those dates.
And second, big news. Mark your calendars, get out the bright red marker, whatever you got to do. Next month's deep dive. It's being crafted by our very own compliance ninja, the brilliant senior consultant Julia Jones.
Ah, yes, Julia's deep dive.
She's cooking up a fantastic session on how to read and really understand grant solicitations. Trust me, after that one, you'll be reading those things like they're, juicy novels instead of cryptic legal texts.
Julia has a real talent for distilling complex information. It will be immensely valuable for anyone working with grants.
Couldn't agree more. But today, my friends, we're diving headfirst into the fascinating, the crucial, the occasionally eyebrow-raising world of prior written approval for grant awards.
A topic that often raises questions.
I know what you're thinking. Prior written approval sounds about as exciting as watching paint dry. But stick with us. Seriously, understanding this stuff, it's like having the secret decoder ring for your grant. It helps you avoid those big uh-oh moments.
Those moments that can lead to financial complications? Yes. For many of you, navigating grant and research administration, especially now, this time of year can be busy.
Understatement.
Understanding when and why prior written approval is needed can genuinely reduce stress.
Precisely. And our treasure map for this particular expedition, it's our very own May 2025 SSCC newsletter. So consider this your rapid-fire download of the most important bits.
Delivered with our usual blend of expertise and
enthusiastic clarity, let's call it that.
Our mission today is quite straightforward but vital. We want to equip you, our listeners, with a clear understanding of when federal regulations say you must get that prior written approval.
Because knowing ahead of time, that's your best defense against audit findings, right?
Yeah.
Keeps things running smoothly.
Exactly. Proactive knowledge is key.
All right, let's get this compliance party started. So a question we hear a lot, and maybe one bouncing around in your own head is just, should I contact my program officer about this?
Ah, yes, the classic dilemma.
It's like that little nudge, when you're about to do something maybe a little out of the ordinary with the grant funds.
Thinking proactively about engaging your program officer is definitely a sign of good grant management. Our goal today is really to give you more solid ground, more confidence in knowing when that outreach is actually required by the rules.
Good stuff. And here's a key point right off the bat.
Yeah.
This whole prior written approval thing. It's not some weird exception for just one type of funding.
That's a very important point.
Right. Whether you've got a straightforward grant or maybe a more complex contract, a cooperative agreement, even those kind of mysterious fixed price awards.
Yeah.
The basic idea of getting that written okay beforehand, it often applies. It's surprisingly universal.
It is. While your specific award terms always rule the day, the general expectation for proactive communication and getting documented agreement for certain changes, that's a pretty consistent thread across federal funding.
Yeah, and because it pops up everywhere, the brain trust here at SSCC.
The team, yes.
Yeah, the team, incredibly smart folks who really know their compliance onions. We strongly recommend that organizations, so you folks listening, set up a really solid, consistent way to manage all your awards and base it on the bedrock of federal regulations, which is Title II CFR Part 200. Think of it like creating a universal language for how you handle funding. It just makes everything smoother, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Establishing that baseline using the federal regs brings consistency, it simplifies training for your staff, and it gives you a much stronger position if compliance questions ever come up. It's a stable foundation.
Okay, let's nail down the definition. What does prior approval actually mean, according to the feds?
Let's look at the official definition. Title II CFR Section 200.1 defines it as, let me get the exact wording, the written approval obtained in advance by an authorized official of a federal agency or pass-through entity of certain costs or programmatic decisions.
Okay, key words there. Written and in advance. Got to tattoo those on your brain, people. No psychic approvals allowed, sadly.
That emphasis is critical. Written in advance. It underscores that this is a formal thing and it has to happen before you act. Verbal chats after the fact notes, they generally don't cut it.
Right. So while the main rule book is great, sometimes individual agencies like to add their own little twist, don't they? Keep us on our toes.
Agencies can and do impose their own specific requirements, yes.
There's a really trusty guide in Title II CFR Section 200.407.
Yeah.
And we at SSCC, we heartily recommend using that section as your go-to framework for figuring out when you need to ask for that golden yes in writing.
Section 200.407 is an excellent starting point. It covers the majority of common situations. Of course, you always need to read your specific award documents for any extra agency rules, but 200.407 gives you a really solid baseline.
And the big idea behind Section 200.407, it's really just good old-fashioned common sense kind of dressed up in regulation speak. If you're looking at a cost or maybe a change to your project and you think, is this definitely reasonable? Is it allocable? Will someone question this later? If those little alarm bells are ringing,
That's your cue.
that's your cue. Seek prior written approval. It's way better to ask for directions than get totally lost in the compliance woods, right?
Exactly. Asking proactively when things are unclear shows you're being a responsible steward of the funds. It prevents misunderstandings, prevents potential disallowances later.
Okay, but here's a super important caveat. A little nugget to store away.
Yes.
Just because you didn't get prior written approval for something, it doesn't automatically mean disaster. It doesn't automatically make the cost unallowable unless, and this is the big unless, prior approval was specifically required for that thing in the first place.
That is a crucial clarification. The lack of prior approval isn't by itself a reason to disallow a cost. However, if your award terms explicitly say you need prior approval for X and you didn't get it, then yes, that cost could absolutely be disallowed in an audit.
Gotcha. So check the requirements first.
Okay.
Let's dive into the specifics. The when in doubt, ask it out checklist.
The common scenarios outlined in the regulations.
Yeah, we're going to run through these based on Section 200.407 and those handy links we put in the newsletter. Hold on to your hats, compliance comrades.
These are the areas the regulations flag as having, let's say, a higher potential for issues if there isn't clear advance agreement.
Makes sense. First up, Section 200.306C, cost sharing. So if you're planning any big changes to how you're meeting your cost share promises,
Significant changes, yes.
you probably need to get that okay in writing first. You can't just decide that instead of donating that gently used office chair you promised, you're now going to contribute a lifetime supply of artisanal cheese without a heads up.
Changes to committed cost sharing affect the project's financial structure and your organization's contributions, so the agency needs to review and approve.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, next, Section 200.307B, program income. If your grant activities start making money,
Generating income, yes.
and you have a brilliant idea to use that money in a way that wasn't in the original plan, you'll likely need approval. Like, you can't just use the cash from your grant-funded bake sale to, I don't know, buy a bouncy castle for the office without checking first.
The award usually specifies how program income should be used. Any deviation from that approved plan generally requires prior notification and agreement.
Right. Okay, moving on to a big one. Section 200.308, specifically Parts E, F, G, and H revision of budget and program plans. This covers a whole bunch of situations.
It's quite comprehensive.
Yeah, basically, if you're making substantial changes to your project's goals, the scope, how you're moving significant money between budget categories, it's like needing permission to rewrite the ending of your grant story halfway through.
Exactly. These are fundamental changes that could really impact the project's outcomes or financial plan. It's all about staying aligned with the agency's goals for the funding.
And tucked inside those budget revision rules is our old friend, Section 200.313, equipment.
Ah, yes. Equipment.
If you want to buy equipment, especially pricey stuff, that wasn't in your original approved budget. You almost certainly need prior approval. Thinking of upgrading your lab's abacus to a supercomputer with grant funds?
Better check first.
Definitely check first. The purchase of capital equipment is a significant expense. Agencies need to ensure it's necessary for the project and justified.
Okay, next one. Section 200.333, fixed amount subawards. These are kind of special.
A specific type of subword, yes. If you need to make major changes to the terms you already agreed on for these fixed amount deals, you'll likely need the green light. It's like needing permission to change the rules of a very specific game after it started.
Because the funding level is predetermined based on meeting milestones or deliverables, any changes to the scope really need careful review and prior agreement.
Got it. Now, a quick nod to Section 200.403 factors affecting allowability of
A
costs.
foundational section.
Right. Now, this one doesn't always scream prior approval needed, but it's a great reminder that if a cost seems a bit iffy based on these factors, is it reasonable, lockable, necessary, all that good stuff, then getting prior approval is just smart. It's a good insurance policy against audit surprises later, like asking for a second opinion when you're not totally sure.
That's a very good way to put it. Section 403 provides the principles for determining allowability. Thinking about those principles proactively can absolutely guide your decision on whether seeking prior approval is the prudent path, even if not explicitly required for that specific cost type in 407.
Okay, let's talk people. Section 200.430H1, compensation for personal services, specifically paragraph H. This usually kicks in if you're making big shifts in how you're charging personnel costs.
Significant rebudgeting of effort, for example.
Yeah, or bringing on key people who weren't in the original proposal. You can't just, decide to hire a team of professional interpretive dancers to explain your research findings without talking to the agency first.
Well, perhaps not, typically. But yes, significant changes to the proposed staffing plan or effort allocation need agency awareness and approval to ensure costs are still appropriate and allowable.
Right alongside that, Section 200.431, compensation fringe benefits.
Also important.
If your organization makes a substantial change to its fringe benefit rates or policies, and that change significantly impacts the cost charged to the grant, you probably need approval. Can't suddenly decide to offer every grant-funded staff member a personal llama groomer as a new fringe benefit without a heads up.
Changes to fringe rates can have significant budget impacts. Prior approval ensures these changes are factored in and remain reasonable and allowable under the award.
Back to the physical stuff. Section 200.439, equipment and other capital expenditures.
This overlaps with 200.313 but is broader.
Yeah, reinforces the equipment point, but also covers other big capital buys that weren't in the plan. Thinking of building, a state-of-the-art zero-gravity simulation chamber in the break room using grant funds?
Definitely requires a conversation first.
Yes, a prior written approval conversation.
Any significant capital expenditure not in the approved budget needs prior review for necessity and allowability.
Okay, doing international work. Pay attention to Section 200.440, exchange rates.
The complexities of currency fluctuation.
Right. If your project involves international costs and the exchange rates go wild, potentially messing up your budget significantly, you might need to seek approval for adjustments or how you're handling it, like needing to recalculate your souvenir budget when the local currency suddenly tanks or skyrockets.
Significant unforeseen impacts from exchange rate fluctuations might require discussion and prior agreement on how to manage the budget implications.
Okay, nobody likes these. Section 200.441, fines, penalties, damages, and other settlements.
Generally unallowable.
Generally. You typically can't use grant funds for these unless you get specific prior approval. So if your grant-funded drone accidentally delivers pizza to the wrong house and causes minor property damage resulting in a settlement, you probably can't just pay that from the grant without asking.
Federal funds are meant for project activities. Using them for fines or settlements is usually outside that scope and requires explicit justification and prior agency approval, which may be rare.
Good to know. Also, watch out for Section 200.442A, fundraising and investment management costs.
Also typically unallowable.
Yeah, grant funds usually aren't meant for drumming up more money or managing investments. If you think you have a very specific, legitimate reason to charge such costs, you absolutely need prior written approval. Can't use your research grant to host a fancy fundraising gala, right?
Correct. These are generally considered administrative or institutional costs, not direct project costs, and would require very strong justification and prior approval.
Okay, what about getting started? Section 200.455, organization costs.
Costs related to establishing an organization.
Yeah, the cost of just setting up shop. You'll usually need prior approval if you plan to charge these initial setup costs to a federal award. Can't bill the feds for designing your very first company logo without getting the okay first.
These costs often predate the award period itself, so charging them to a grant requires specific review and prior agreement.
Planning a little office makeover. Look at Section 200.462 rearrangement and reconversion costs.
Altering facilities.
If you're spending significant money physically changing your space specifically for the grant project and it wasn't in the original plan, might need prior approval. You can't just decide to knock down a wall to build a dedicated NatPod room for grant staff without a discussion.
If the alterations are substantial and necessary for the project, prior approval ensures the costs are reasonable and directly benefit the award's objectives.
And last but definitely not least on this list, Section 200.475A, travel costs.
Always a common area of question.
For sure. Now, routine travel that's already in your approved budget. Usually fine, no extra approval needed, but yeah, significant changes like suddenly needing extensive international travel that wasn't planned, or maybe a huge unexpected travel expense.
That might require prior written approval.
Yeah. You can't suddenly decide to send the entire research team on a fact-finding mission to Tahiti without getting that signed off first.
Significant deviations from the approved travel budget or scope, especially international travel, often need prior agency review to ensure necessity and allowability.
Whew. Okay, that was quite the whirlwind tour through the sometimes wild landscape of prior written approval.
We covered the main areas listed in 200.407.
We did. And remember, folks, while this list is your trusty map, you always got to double-check the specific terms and conditions of your individual award.
Absolutely critical.
Because, as we mentioned, funding agencies can have their own extra rules,
Yeah.
right? It's mentioned in Section 200.208. They like to keep us on our toes, those wonderful people.
That is the paramount guidance, your specific award document. It might add requirements or sometimes even waive some of these general ones, though that's less common. Always start with your award.
So, the big takeaway, the shiny summary from this regulatory rodeo, it really boils down to this. Prior written approval is about being proactive. It's about keeping those lines of communication open with your funding agency.
Transparency and collaboration.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about saving yourself from potential headaches, from disallowances, from those super awkward, oops, I didn't realize I needed to ask about spending $50,000 on that, conversations later on.
It prevents problems down the line.
Think of it like sending a friendly postcard to your program officer before you make a big move. Hey, just giving you a heads up about this thing we're thinking of doing.
That's a good analogy. Proactive communication demonstrates responsible management and builds trust.
And speaking of responsible management, there's a final little thought to chew on as you go about your day.
Okay.
If just a little bit of proactive communication, maybe just sending one email, can be the superhero that stops a compliance crisis, isn't it worth sending that email?
It almost always is.
It's like having a tiny compliance guardian angel whispering in your ear, right? Listen to that angel.
A wise approach. Investing a small amount of time upfront in communication can save enormous amounts of time, resources, and potential issues later.
And remember, your pals here at SSCC, the gurus, the experts in all things compliance.
We are here to help.
We are. We're always here to help you navigate these sometimes murky waters. If you ever have a question, and let's be real, sometimes this stuff does feel like a riddle wrapped in an enigma.
It can be complex.
Don't hesitate to reach out. We really are here to make your grant administration journey as smooth, successful, and, dare I say, maybe even slightly less stressful.
That is certainly our goal. We encourage you to view Shepard-Smith Compliance Consulting as a resource. If specific questions arise about prior approval or any other compliance matter, please feel free to contact us.
All right, folks, that is all the deep diving we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this thrilling expedition through the land of prior written approval.
Thank you for listening.
We'll catch you next month for Julia Jones's expert insights on conquering those grant solicitations. Until then, stay compliant, stay curious, and keep those amazing projects moving forward.